All right, this is Unit 5, Lesson 2, so you should be starting a fresh page in your notebook. I am on pages 8 and 9 of mine, so make sure you're staying updated in your table of contents. Our goal today is to find a missing leg using the Pythagorean theorem. Remember that the Pythagorean theorem is that a squared plus b squared equals c squared in a right triangle. Here's our do now. You can copy it into your notebook and write your thoughts about those 4 pictures. Underneath your do now in your 2-column notes, you will draw this diagram of a right triangle, the legs and the hypotenuse labeled, and these are the 4 steps to finding the missing leg if we know the other leg and the hypotenuse. Remind yourself that the legs are A and B, but the hypotenuse is always C. The hypotenuse is always across from that 90-degree angle, and it should be the longest side. Once you've copied those 4 steps into your notes, we'll start with question number 1. Question number 1 says that a right triangle has a hypotenuse that measures 13 centimeters and it has one leg that measures 5 centimeters. Determine the length of the missing leg and label the triangle first. So let's look at our problem and write what we know. For question number 1, we know that the hypotenuse is 13 centimeters. And we know that one of the legs is 5 centimeters. So our goal is to find that other leg. So we'll start by labeling our triangle. The 2 legs of the triangle make that 90-degree angle. So we have 2 legs here. My legs are A and B. It doesn't matter which one we label A and which one we label B, as long as my hypotenuse is C. We know that the hypotenuse is 13 centimeters long, and we know one of those legs is 5 centimeters long, so I can pick either one to assign the 5 centimeters to. If we choose A, that means that B is the missing leg. So that is what we will try to find with our steps. The steps to our problem will go on the right-hand side of our 2-column notes. And step number 1 is to identify my legs and the hypotenuse. Again, A is 5. B is what we're looking for. It's what we don't know. And C is 13. It's important to write out what the lengths of A, B, and C are so that in step 2, when we plug them into our Pythagorean theorem, the values will go in the right spot in the formula. So if I have A squared plus B squared equals C squared, and I substitute in 5 and 13 for A and C, those are the values I know. That means keeping my formula exactly the same, I'm just replacing the variable A with the value 5 and the variable C with the value 13. Everything else will stay the same. We'll keep my B squared because B then is the variable that I'm solving for. I can only have one variable if I'm going to solve for B. So I have 5 squared plus B squared equals 13 squared. So my third step is to evaluate and to solve for B. So on my calculator, I'll do 5 squared. Remember, 5 squared means 5 times 5. That is 25. And 13 squared, which is 13 times 13, 169. So 25 plus B squared is 169. So this is where it's a little bit different than finding the hypotenuse. I don't want to add together 25 and 169 because I want 25 and B squared to add up to be 169. So I'm solving for B. I'm going to isolate B by doing opposite operations to get B by itself. So my first step will be to subtract the 25 because that 25 is being added with B squared and it's positive. So to get rid of it, I'll want to subtract because 25 minus 25 is 0. If I do something to one side of my equation, though, I have to do it to the other. So I'm going to subtract 25 from both sides. And that should leave me with B squared on its own on the left side. And that should be equal to 144. So my final step to get B instead of B squared, to get rid of that squared, the opposite operation of squared is the square root. So I'll square root both sides because the square root of b squared is b. So my b should be equal to the square root of 144. If I put that into my calculator, it is 12, because 12 squared is equal to 144. So my final answer is that missing leg is 12 centimeters. So my triangle is 12 centimeters wide, 5 centimeters tall, with a 13 centimeter hypotenuse. We'll try another one. Here we have a right triangle that has a hypotenuse that measures 20 inches and a leg that measures 12 inches. Now we're going to find the side of another missing leg. So let's write out our important information. This is number 2. My hypotenuse is 20 inches. My one leg is 12. Our goal is to find the missing leg. First, we'll label our triangle. So this triangle is kind of turned on its side. Still, the legs are the sides that make that 90-degree angle. So my two legs make the 90-degree angle so that the side across from the 90-degree angle, which is the biggest angle in the triangle, is my hypotenuse, C. In this case, it's 20 inches. My legs are A and B. Last time we let the known leg be A, we can switch that. It doesn't matter if I assign the 12 inches to A or B. So let's say B is 12 inches so that we can practice the other way. So A is what we're looking for. We don't know how many inches A is. So we're going to first, in our steps, identify our three sides. So if A is what we don't know, we'll do a question mark, and B is 12 and C is 20. I write them out so that I can easily substitute them into my Pythagorean theorem. Says that a squared plus b squared equals c squared in a right triangle. When I substitute in for my known variables, b and c, I keep a variable because that's what we'll solve for. And b will be 12, 12 squared. C will be 20, 20 squared. So to solve for a, we're going to first simplify by evaluating 12 squared and 20 squared. 12 times 12 is 144. And 20 squared is 400. So if I'm going to solve for a squared, first I'll get a squared by itself on the left side by doing the opposite operation. So instead of plus 144, I'll do minus 144. And if I do it to one side of the equation, I have to do it to both sides. Because adding 144 and then subtracting it will give me 0. So I'll be left with just a squared. And 400 minus 144 is 256. So step number 4 is to take the square root, because now to get a instead of a squared, I have to do the opposite operation again, which is take the square root. If I do something to one side, I have to do it to both sides. So by taking the square root of a squared, the squared and the square root cancel each other out. They're opposite operations. So I'll just get a is the square root of 256, which is 16. So I know that my leg is 16 inches. Remember that the square root of 256 could be positive or negative 16, but when we're talking about length, we're assuming that it's positive. That's my final answer. We do have one more question. It's a little bit of a challenge. So if you want to pause and try it first on your own, I think that would be great practice. It says that a right triangle has sides that are 4 centimeters and x centimeters. So that's the side that we don't know, x for the unknown variable. And my hypotenuse is the square root of 97. So we're going to find x. We're going to find our missing side. If those two sides that make up the 90-degree angle are my legs, that means I have one leg that's 4 and one leg that's x. That could be a and b. And my c is the square root of 97. So when I identify that in my steps, I have a is 4, b is x, and c is the square root of 97. So step 2 is to plug all those values into my Pythagorean theorem. Now we kind of have something to substitute for each variable. My Pythagorean theorem says that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So I'm going to substitute in for a, b, and c. And I should have 4 squared plus x squared equals the square root of 97 squared. So I think that's the challenge. So our next step is to evaluate that and then solve for x. 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. X we still don't know. And the square root of 97 squared, if you type that into the calculator, you might notice that it's a little interesting. I should just get 97. Because remember that those are opposite operations. It's like if I take a number and I add 3 and then I subtract 3, I should be back to the same number. It's the same. If I find the number that when I multiply it by itself gives me 97, and then I square that number, I should be back to 97. So really I don't have to do any math. Knowing that those are opposite operations, the squared and the square root cancel each other out. So now to get x by itself, I just have to take away that 16 to make it 0. And I'll be left with x squared equals 97 minus 16, which is 81. Then to get x, I would do the square root of both sides. And I get x equals the square root of 81, which is positive or negative 9. So x is 9. My missing leg is 9 centimeters. So make sure you write your exit task at the bottom of your notes. Still, you want one question about the activity that we did today, these notes. If you don't have a question about them yourself, you could consider a question that somebody else might ask, but we're practicing the act of asking questions, so make sure that's down at the bottom of your note page. And get ready for our next lesson.